Good morning. I'd like to first begin by extending an apology on behalf of the Virtual Town Hall as we were experiencing technical difficulties. And for that, we thank you for your patience. My name is Elvia Kelly. I'm with the Fort Bragg Garrison Public Affairs Office, and we are convened here today to discuss the renaming of Fort Bragg. Chairing us today is Mayor Pro Tem Ms. Kathy Jensen, District 1.
Good morning, and again, thank you for your patience. I am here today and representing the City of Fayetteville, North Carolina, and I appreciate the invite. Fort Bragg has asked the city to broadcast this virtual town hall to reach out to our residents and others. So we are streaming this event live online. I consider it an honor to help Fort Bragg complete the mission to collect community feedback for the renaming of the installation. Congress mandated the renaming, and the city is providing the platform for you all to state what is on your mind. I want to be clear. This is the people's voices that matter. Fort Bragg will listen to what you have to say and read your comments. My father and husband both are retired officers in the United States Army and both served many years here at Fort Bragg. I've been proud to be raised and part of this community that I represent. This event is one way that you will shape the installation for hopefully generations to come. It is proof that the city will answer when Fort Bragg needs help. Fort Bragg could have made this decision to select a new name without community input, but the military leaders believe that your input is very important. Now, I would like to introduce today's town hall panelists. Colonel Scott Pence, the Fort Bragg Garrison Commander. The Fort Bragg Garrison Commander is similar to our mayor of Fayetteville. Colonel Pence has served 23 years in the military, 3 of which he has served and continues to serve at Fort Bragg. Retired Major General Rodney Anderson, the former Deputy Commander of the 18th Airborne Corps in Fort Bragg. Major General Anderson understands the dynamics of Fort Bragg and all its major commands. Major General Anderson is here to help address questions from our audience that it pertains to renaming of Fort Bragg. Dr. Linda Carnes McNaughton is a Fort Bragg curator and archaeologist. Why did I not be able to say that? Sorry, archaeologist. Dr. Carnes McNaught has been on Fort Bragg for more than 15 years and has also a deep knowledge of the history of Fort Bragg and its historical landmarks and artifacts. I apologize for crucifying your name. So I am going to get started, and we are going to turn it over to Colonel Pence. Again, thank you for tuning in, and thank you for your patience.
Hello, good morning. I'm Colonel Scott Pence, the Garrison Commander of Fort Bragg, and want to also extend my deepest thanks to the City of Fayetteville for sponsoring this town hall today. The bottom line is we're here because Fort Bragg will be renamed. The 2021 National Defense Authorization Act dictates that 9 installations in the United States will be renamed. Fort Bragg is one of them. It was passed by overwhelming majority in the House and in the Senate. It was vetoed, and then the Senate overrode the veto and was passed with overwhelming majorities on both sides. So this is not Fort Bragg's idea to change their name. It's not Fayetteville's idea. It's not Cumberland County's idea, or even North Carolina State. We're directed to change the name by the U.S. Congress. So it will happen. It's important for us to engage the surrounding community to make sure that whatever names are suggested it's a name that's acceptable for the core of the community. And that's critically important for us. We have over 128,000 retirees who have decided to retire right here in this area. And countless veterans have a positive experience in the area and have made this region their home. So the community is not only filled with veterans and retirees and active duty personnel, but the community itself is among the most supportive of our military servicemen than anywhere in the world. The fact is, this installation is the world's premier power projection platform, and it's made great by the elite soldiers that are attracted to it, and also the first-termers who this is their first duty station in their entire lives, and they decide time and time again to return and extend and re-enlist and be here longer. The community has a big role in that, between their support and their service. The word Bragg resonates with many of our community members. The term "back at Bragg" was clear to me before I ever arrived at Fort Bragg, serving at Fort Benning with the 75th Ranger Regiment, or at Italy with the 173rd Airborne Brigade. I had heard this term many times, "back at Bragg," and what it really meant was the right way to do things, the commitment to excellence, the dedication, and the sense of urgency that exists on Bragg is what permeates the entire Army. So this term is important, and it has a emotive response when people talk about changing it. So we have to have empathy for many people who are attached to that name, who grew up here, and believe that name represents all of us. But at the same time, we will remain the world's premier power projection platform, regardless of what the installation's name is and what's on any sign. So the number one goal for us here at Fort Bragg is to inform, to make sure that the name change doesn't take anybody by surprise. The second goal is to collect suggestions for names and ensure that any name that someone is thinking about in DC is a name that is going to be acceptable for the members of this community. There are so many deserving, inspiring stories, and I think we'll hear from some of those today. And to submit your suggestion for a name for Fort Bragg, there's two places you can go. There's a place called thenamingcommission.gov, and that's the National Naming Commission website that allows you to submit a name and give a justification. And number two, there's the site that our team built here, and that you can get to that by going to the Garrison Commander's Facebook page. Pinned at the top is our Fort Bragg survey, and that allows you to say where you're coming from, how long you've been associated with the community, how you feel about this name change, whether you say that the time has come, it's time to do it, or you're opposed to the name change. That's important for us to know. And then we've got many of the names that have been suggested and an opportunity for you to box check which ones are acceptable to you. And that data will be used for us and our diverse panel that's put together by General Retired Dan McNeil, Sergeant Major Steve England, and several other of the community leaders who will look at that list and apply a human eye with their background and experience and decide which ones are going to resonate with the community. Those names will be forwarded to the naming commission that is working for the Department of Defense to make sure that we have input on the community and we have input on what the name of Fort Bragg will be. So with that, I'm glad to announce a critical partner for the Fort Bragg team, Dr. Linda Carnes-McNaughton, who is the curator and archaeologist for Fort Bragg. And without further ado, Linda, you can join us now.
Thank you, Colonel Pence, and thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Jensen. I also am honored to be here today, and I can also say I am a military brat. I was born at Fort McPherson. So my job here today, as Colonel Pence invited me, is to inform on the depth and breadth of the history of this landscape. So as an archaeologist, I can testify to 12,000 years of human occupation on the landscape, but I'm only going to bring you up to 1880s today. So I'm going to begin with this illustration, if we can have it, please. Yeah, this is the 1884 McDuffie map. What I've done here is superimpose the current footprint of Fort Bragg onto this landscape, just to give you, again, an idea of mass. and 165,000 acres now that it covers. But using documents like this, these are one of several Rosetta Stones that help us to look back at time and to understand the history of naming conventions that have occurred for hundreds of years on the landscape. Probably one of the oldest is a prehistoric travel corridor called Yadkin Road. And Yadkin in Siouan language means the big tree, so obviously a reference to the longleaf pine. But also this map helps us to get that proximity to the city of Fayetteville and obviously the greater environment that it's part of. It has names of roads, it has names of landowners, it has mill ponds, it has a great deal of information that helps create these communities lost and found. Moving forward pretty quickly here is a property owner's map. This was created in 1919, and I don't expect you to be able to read it, but it represents over 600 land tracts that were purchased by the War Department to create Camp Bragg. At that time, 130,000 acre footprint. So we have the names of the previous owners, we have historic roadbeds, we have creeks, railroads, and this is also referred to as a cadastral map. So the names on here represent something too. And I think as we move through time, you'll see that names place things on a historical landscape, and some names change, some names get renamed. Right, and I'm going to focus on the creation of Fort Bragg. By 1919, the Army had spent $7 million to purchase the land and put that towards construction of what was the beginning of Camp Bragg. So where I've highlighted in blue, I'm going to zero in on that in just a minute. In 1919, February actually, over 15,000 troops were moved here from Camp McClellan, Alabama, as well as 560-something officers, 51 nurses, and 6,000 mules and horses. Of course, they were moved here to pull the artillery. It was set up as a field artillery base. So in August of 1918, we know that the War Department created Camp Bragg and named it for a field artillery person, at that time a noted field artillery person. He was a native of North Carolina and a West Point graduate. He was known specifically for the Battle of Buena Vista in 1847, where he was an exceptional artillery officer. And that theme of naming this installation for field artillery officers continues as we look at the naming conventions through time and as we look at the names applied to the main cantonment. As we were working with the garrison commander in preparation for the naming commission to come, we actually were tasked with researching 486 street names and what the origins of those names were. And it also applies to buildings and other landscape features. So we split it up into these 5 primary naming stages, which began pre-Fort Bragg, if you will, geographic pre-installation community names that are still out there. And then the primary field artillery era, which took place in 1918 to 1922. Then we have the post-Korea conflict airborne era, where many of the streets and places were named for airborne personnel, as well as post personnel. Post-Korea War airborne, where the streets and the housing were named for battles. And finally, the current naming area, when special forces in the 1950s and 60s come into the area, and many of these street names and place names are derived from unconventional warfare proponents. So this is just a close-up of that 1919 streetscape. And again, sticking to the naming convention at the time, honoring field artillery people from the Revolutionary War all the way through the Civil War. We had 19 street names that were named for these individuals. We know now through working with the naming convention, the naming commission, and garrison commander that 8 of these names are planned for change. Long Street, which was a historic name, will simply be spelled 2 words now. And finally, I just circle back to this part about historic landscape features, things that last on the landscape a very long time and mean a lot to a lot of people. Physical landscape names become cultural landscape names, and we hold them dear. They stay with us a long time. This is an example of the 1884 McDuffie map showing an ancient mill pond that was set up by the McKellar family, who were Highland Scots who moved in here into the mid-1750s. And they had a mill pond, and they owned a lot of land. They happened to also have a descendant who served in the Confederate Army as a captain in the cavalry, and he's buried at Longstreet Church. So this was one of our examples where the heritage name of the land predated the Civil War considerably. And so we will keep the name of the pond, we'll keep the name of the lodge, and we will change that extension of McKellar to Gruber. So this is a lot to cover, and I'm sure that our Field Artillery, retired Major General Anderson, will bring us forward and expand more of the legacy of Fort Bragg in more modern times. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. My name is Rodney Anderson, Major General, U.S. Army, retired and soldier for life. I had the great honor and privilege of serving in the United States Army for 33 years, 14 of those years at Fort Bragg. My last military assignment was as Deputy Commander of Fort Bragg. My family and I enjoyed the privilege of living all over the world, yet upon retirement, we decided that, without question, the place to retire and the place to live was Fayetteville, North Carolina. There are many things that make Fayetteville, North Carolina special. I could talk about the arts, I could talk about the businesses, I could talk about the churches and places of worship, the dynamic downtown, the exceptional educational institutions. I could talk about fantastic Fort Bragg, and I could continue, but let me just say the most important thing, the people. The people that call Fayetteville and our region of Cumberland County home are special. And that is why I want to share with you just a little bit about what makes them special, what makes this place special. My personal and professional experiences at Fort Bragg includes a long list of soldiers, leaders, veterans, and family members. A few of the many names that come to mind as I've had an opportunity to reflect include Austin, Aponte, Baggett, Brees, Brown, Capel, Drawn, Dunwoody, Green, Hood, Helmick, Hull, Johnson, Lindsay, McCluskey, McNeil, McFadden, McFowler, Spencer, Rodriguez, Taylor, Waller, Ward, just to name a few. These women and men are the core of my memories and what makes Fort Bragg absolutely special for me. But these men are just a bit of the legacy, the most recent legacy. You've heard from the historian that the legacy of Fort Bragg goes back to more than a century. Fort Bragg is known as the home of the Airborne and Special Operations Forces. Some affectionately call it the center of the military universe. History records that when surgical military capabilities are needed, our nation calls on our special operating forces. When things are really urgent, be they humanitarian or military, the nation sends the 82nd Airborne Division. So it is no surprise to me that the last soldier, the last trooper on the airplane out of Afghanistan was the commanding general of the 82nd Airborne Division. Each of the commands on Fort Bragg have a special mission and a unique history. They include U.S. Army Forces Command, U.S. Army Reserve Command, 18th Airborne Corps, U.S. Army Special Operations Command, Joint Special Operations Command, the 82nd Airborne Division, America's Guard of Honor, 3rd Expeditionary Sustainment Command, U.S. Army Civil Affairs and Psychological Operations, Security Force Assistance Command, 43rd Air Mobility Operations Group, and Womack Army Medical Center, just to name a few. Fort Bragg is the largest military installation in the world. Now to renaming. Fort Bragg renaming marks a milestone in U.S. Army history and highlights those who served, who are serving, and who will serve in the future. It also highlights the importance of the host communities that are so essential in hosting the men and women who serve on Fort Bragg. It is commendable that Fort Bragg's installation commander and garrison commander are reaching out to the community for their input. That was not always the case. The names suggested should be reflective of U.S. Army history, major commands, and highlight the extraordinary legacy of the U.S. military, soldiers, leaders, paratroopers, operators, and families, past, present, and future. The suggested names can be a virtue or a value or a conflict or a battle, as long as the name is empowering and encouraging. And thank you very much for your participation and your suggestions. Thank you for taking the time to think about this very important matter. And thank you very much for all you do in your service and your support of those who serve. All the way. And now I'll be followed by Fayetteville Mayor Pro Tem Kathy Jensen.
Thank you, Major General Anderson. Thank you all for asking the City of Fayetteville to work with you on this effort. It shows that we are a community and that the people's voices are valued. After a new name for Fort Bragg is selected, it will be known that Fort Bragg and the people who live here were included in the historical process. I encourage everyone who may be hesitating to speak up now so your voice can be heard. It is not every day that we have the ear of these military leaders and the federal lawmakers. Visit thenamingcommission.gov. I'm going to say that over again. thenamingcommission.gov to submit names for consideration to do it at the Fort Bragg website. After the event concludes, we will encourage you to complete the Fort Bragg survey found on the Fort Bragg Garrison Commander Facebook page. So I personally went up to look on it. If you go to your Facebook and hit the search, go into Garrison Commander, U.S. Army Garrison Fort Bragg. Please go on the page, like it, and use the survey. Your voice is needed. Right now, we will take questions from those who are here and those who are watching this event. The Fort Bragg Public Affairs Officer will begin with this part of the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jensen. We will be followed by our special guest, Ms. Vicki Andrews. Ms. Vicki Andrews is the former chair of the Cumberland County Democratic Party.
Good morning. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I don't think I really have a question, but I do have a suggestion for a name change, if there is a name change. I really strongly would like you to consider Dr. Mary Walker. She is the only woman to have received the Medal of Honor. And I think that's worthy of consideration. She worked for the Union Army, but she also cared for Confederate soldiers. And so in all the things that you have to consider, it's 2021. We need to make sure we at least consider this powerful woman who did so much during the Civil War. So thank you for this opportunity to talk with you, and that I am here and volunteer to assist. This is important to me because I'm a veteran and I'm a mom, and it's important. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Andrews. Followed by Ms. Andrews, we have Mr. Greeley Mitchell.
Did you want to say something, General?
Yeah,
Excuse
I
me.
would just like to second that motion. Mary Walker is a very distinguished heroine, and certainly that name, her name, and what she did and what she means to those still serving today is worthy to be considered. Thank you.
And what we'll do on the Fort Bragg website and survey, we're going to add that name to the survey for people to be able to vote for. It's not really a vote, but it's a acknowledgement of whether that name would be acceptable to the community. So we're going to make sure we add that one.
Thank you. At this time, we have Mr. Greeley
After
Mitchell,
Mary Walker.
retired Army and President of the Cumberland County Veterans Council.
Thank you all for inviting me here today to speak. I would not say I'm speaking on behalf of all the veterans because that would not be true, but I will speak on behalf of the veterans that are not here to speak for themselves and the one I've talked to. We want a name that everyone would be proud of. We want a name that we all agree upon. And based on a previous conversation I had with some of the veterans, we looked at the name, we did the research, and we talked about Edward S. Bragg. It will lessen the economic impact. It will have very little impact on the individuals that have served on Fort Bragg, less impact on individuals that was born on Fort Bragg. That's the decision that we also believe that belong to the men and women that have served this nation, as well as their family members, because they paid the price to have that choice, to make that decision. And most of all, I don't think that we will find a name that everyone is going to be happy with. Colin Powell said it best. Being responsible means pissing people off. And I guess that's what we're going to have to do in the decision-making process. Thank you all for allowing me to be here.
Panel members, any additional comments?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Greeley.
And for
At this time-
I guess I do have an additional contact. What
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Mitchell is talking about is Brigadier General Edward Stuyvesant Bragg, who served in the Union Army in the Civil War, and he came from Wisconsin, served in the Wisconsin group, later became a representative from Wisconsin.
He was cousin to Bragg.
And he was cousin to Braxton Bragg, the current namesake.
Thank you, Colonel Pence.
Good afternoon, guys. So I think I have 3 concerns that I'll just form as questions and ask them quickly, and if you can answer them, that would be awesome. If not, I understand. So I understand the cultural injury that comes from honoring Confederate soldiers. And I understand that the renaming is estimated to take $7.2 million. I know that that's a rough number or not a final number. How do we justify spending that amount of money on a renaming when that money could be served in this community, both in Fayetteville and within the military community? It could very well serve different parts of our community. And then my other question is that in this community, we have a multitude of small businesses that have taken the name Bragg, streets that have taken the name Bragg. So how will those businesses, how will those streets handle the name change? Will they then be expected to also change their name? What federal and state support might there be for those businesses, those small businesses? And then my final question is the community. So we are a very cohesive community. All of the communities that surround Fort Bragg, Fayetteville, and other communities, I'll speak to Fayetteville because that's where I'm from. How will we handle a disconnect of cohesion that may come from places changing names as we hit gates? That's it, that's all I got. Sorry, that's a lot.
No, very well said. You like to handle one of those or no?
Panel members?
Yes. Thank you very much for being here and for offering your thoughts And I do believe it is very important that we consider what the economic impact is going to be for our small businesses as well as for our municipal locations that might be impacted because of the name change. I think that's very important, and I think that's something we absolutely, those of us who live in the city and in the county, should seek assistance in doing. As it relates to the name change, I'm reminded that sometimes it takes a period of time to get things right. It took a long time in this nation to abolish slavery. And so it has taken us 100 years to recognize that there is a pain associated with a war that was fought to keep people of color, black people, enslaved. And so the men who fought that war were considered traitors. They were pardoned. And so the namesake, Bragg, is a name of someone who fought against the U.S. Army and who was really pardoned. And so when I think about that, it brings me a level of pain because it is not what I would think of in terms of who we are to honor. And that's sort of my personal feeling about it. But I understand that there are associations with the name Bragg. I have a strong association with the name Bragg. But there's also a level of pain in honoring the Confederacy and someone who was a traitor and a slave owner, I might add. And so that brings me great pain and distress when I think of it. So that's the other perspective. But thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
And to address the second question from Mrs. Sussman, how will this affect businesses in the area?
I can address that. I think Dr. Carnes-McNaughton had a point maybe on the first one.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate or tag on to what General Anderson is saying, that all of us in this room, we realize we're not going to delete or erase history. It has happened. What this renaming does is provide us an opportunity for a new conversation, an inclusive conversation that will be history that we will all embrace.
That's a really good point. The first point was, how do we justify spending money on a name change when there's so many other priorities? And usually the response would be, what are the costs if we don't change? And there are many things we could say about that. But we don't need to because we've been directed. And it's not just from the people who control Fort Bragg, like Installation Management Command or FORSCOM. It's not even the Department of Defense, and even the President. It's both houses of Congress, overwhelming. So it's one of those cases where we've been directed to do something, received an order that's as legal as you can find it. So it's something that we have to find a way of doing it and mitigating the adverse effects it'll have on the community, which brings you to your very good, well-stated second point. What's the effect on the local businesses who are tied to the name Bragg? I think it was Ms. Thrush who at the renaming commission said it best when a lot of places put the name Bragg into their business name because they want to be associated with the soldiers, with the premier power projection platform that is Fort Bragg. They didn't necessarily want to be associated with Braxton Bragg. The local businesses will need to be reimbursed. Now, whether that comes from the federal government, and I can't vouch for them or commit funds, of course, I'm just a colonel. However, I can imagine a vested interest by the federal government to make sure that whatever these names at each of these 9 installations in the country, whatever they change to, they want to make sure the community is completely supportive of it. So they have a vested interest in making sure that there's a momentum shift, and people who have names of these 9 installations in the country that are being renamed, they're going to want to make sure they're propelling and exploiting that momentum for the new name to get the maximum possible community buy-in for it. So I can't guarantee anything. I'm not going to obligate funds for the businesses. But between the federal government, the state, each will have a role in making sure that this is embraced by the rest of the community, and anybody who is experiencing financial hardship because of signs, business cards, databases, all of that needs to be incorporated.
Thank you.
And for Ms. Sussman's last question, how will the name change affect the community, and how will the community handle that name change?
We have to go to, is the current name as cohesive as we think it is? Is it dividing some people? As many of us who grew up in the Army many years never knew what Bragg, the namesake, was for Braxton Bragg. Frankly, there's a reason for that. It's because people didn't use that person as an inspiring story to motivate or inspire others. Frankly, and some of our senior members of the community will mention that regardless of his Confederate service, in his last role as a general, he was not a good general. It's hard to paint him as a good general, except for his campaigns in the Mexican-American War. Could we get better? Could it be a name that could bring us together? That's what we're looking for now. We're looking for an opportunity to find something from the community, bottom-up generated, that forms as a cohesive role. And what we haven't talked about yet today is it doesn't have to be a person. A lot of people are talking about whatever you do, don't name it after a person, a virtue or a value. Fort Freedom, Fort Liberty are things that are on the webpage now, receiving a good amount of feedback on, and already other installations are choosing some of our Army values to name their base after. So that's a direction we could take it in also. So, excellent points. I'm so glad you were here today.
Thank you so much for your
Thanks
time.
a lot. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for including the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sussman. And for our next guest, we have Mr. Gerard Falls, the Capitol Encore Academy Director and a U.S. Army veteran.
All right. Greetings and thank you to the whole panel, Mayor Pro Tem Jensen, Dr. McNaughton, General Anderson, and Colonel Pence. My name is Gerard Falls, and as was mentioned, I'm a 82nd Airborne Combat Veteran and a school and community leader here in downtown Fayetteville, and I was originally stationed at Fort Bragg, grew up in Maine, in 2004. And now Fayetteville and this whole community are my home, and a place that my wife, Michelle, and I have chosen to start and raise our family. My main priority with the renaming of the Fort Bragg, and one that I know that many folks share, is that we identify candidates for the honor, if it is going to be a person, who have a local connection to our region, are diverse in background and identity, and have dedicated their lives to advancing liberty and justice for all in a more perfect union. And I appreciated Ms. Andrews bringing up the only woman who's ever gotten the Congressional Medal of Honor. I have two other women I would like to mention, because I do notice that the current list of suggested names on the form does not include any women who undoubtedly have served our country honorably over many centuries. So the first one I would like to suggest is Harriet Tubman, a hero of the Civil War who commanded the troops in the Combahee River raid just south of here in South Carolina, leading 150 black Union soldiers on a mission that freed more than 700 enslaved persons, in addition to the countless other actions of valor and courage that she took in her long and honorable lifetime. Also noteworthy for consideration, Eleanor Roosevelt, a humanitarian, first lady, and civil rights leader who helped to bring about the racial integration of the U.S. Armed Forces and worked in the service of refugees from World War II and helped to lead the important work of galvanizing the American public into service and action, defending the home front in support of our combat forces, including many from here in Fort Bragg, thus ensuring the survival of our democracy. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Comments from our panel members?
We'll have the team add that to the survey page. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Falls, for taking your time. We will now bridge on over to our social media questions. We have a question from Ms. Chelsea Dean. Has anyone consulted Fort Bragg Credit Union or Fort Bragg Harley-Davidson in reference to the name recommendations?
That would be on me. We haven't. Fort Bragg is unique in that we are the only one of the 9 that has a possible candidate for the name change that wouldn't change the name, the 5-letter name. The So we haven't, and that will come with much further down the line and when we start talking to local businesses. And not only can we not promise reimbursement right now, but we can say that it makes logical sense for any local business that had tied itself to the name of the installation to be reimbursed for the cost of changing the name.
Thank you, Colonel Pence. Next question is from Teresa Clem Carver. At this time in our country, you want to waste millions changing a name of a military base. Why on the 21st century is this even considered?
I could take that also. Yeah. One of the things that the naming commission is very focused on, they're tasked by Congress to determine the exact cost of the renaming at each one of the bases at the 9 installations in the country. So they're spending a lot of time on that. We have given our analysis of what that cost will be, and I can tell you, for whatever reason, even though we are the largest installation by population in the country, it wouldn't be the most expensive to rename Fort Bragg signage and the name Fort Bragg. They noted that at Fort Hood and some other places they visited, there are many more instances of seeing the post name all around post, and they're going to have a much tougher time than Fort Bragg will do to change if it needs to change. So that's a really good question that was brought up both online and in person here.
Thank you, Colonel Pence. Ms. Chelsea Dean has a couple more questions. What are the expected costs associated with this project, and where will the funding come from?
Where will the funding coming? The reason why the Naming Commission is computing all of these costs for Congress is because it will come from a special line item for Congress to devote to the Department of Defense to execute this renaming. So it's our responsibility now, as long as the other 8 installations, to do our best due diligence to find out how much that cost will be for all signage, even things like that are on the server and the databases that have the name. And that brings us to the next point, is that the name change, all the signage, probably won't happen overnight. It'll probably be over several years of phased investments that fund the name change in a prudent and pragmatic way.
Thank you, sir. The next question is from Tom McWilliams. Where does this end? Will birth certificates need to be changed too?
Birth certificates. And I think the concern is if you're born at Fort Bragg, will somebody need to change their birth certificate?
No, I couldn't imagine.
No.
I would say vital statistics would answer that question more specifically, but I couldn't imagine it changing if it went formally Fort Bragg with whatever the new name is. You would still be able to find where you were born. Ask
Thank
your
you.
mother.
Thank you, Dr. Linda Carnes-McNaughton. That concludes all of the questions from social media. We will turn the panel on over to Colonel Pence for his final comments.
I want to especially thank the City of Fayetteville, North Carolina, for hosting us today, and especially Mayor Pro Tem Kathy Jensen. Thanks for having us here. Thanks for welcoming us and agreeing to host this here and entertain the questions from the community, which is our most important role here. And it is an honor to have you here today, General Anderson. Thank you for your comments. They resonate with so many of us, and your comments being able to respond to the questions that we had today. And Dr. Linda Carnes-McNaughton, thank you again for being here, providing us historical perspective. What I'll leave you, everybody, today is where you need to go next. If you're already online watching this, you're already online. So you need to go to the namingcommission.gov. Here they are now. And then also go to the Garrison Commander's Facebook page. We've got that survey pinned to the top. We've already got over 8,000 responses on there, and that's exactly what we wanted to do, was field a large net and get as many suggestions as we can. The next step in this naming process is to make sure that we forward some of the top contenders for these names, cleared by a diverse panel of community leaders, to the naming commission, so they're not caught flat-footed when somebody from Congress asks them, what do you think Fort Bragg should be named? They're armed with a number of names that won't be, maybe not be perfect, but will at least be acceptable for a good amount of the members of the community. And that's what we're here to do. So once again, thank you very much for having myself and the panel members, and for everybody in the community for hosting us here in Fayetteville today.
Colonel Pence will be followed by Ms. Jensen.
I would like to thank everyone for sharing their thoughts and their opinions. We appreciate the panelists who have participated today, the guests who came in person, and those who are watching online. Again, it is the people's voices that mattered. Please go to the websites and give your opinion. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for our community. Now I will turn it over to the Fort Bragg Public Affairs Office. Again, thank you for participating.
We will continue to monitor all of the questions that come into the social media feed, and we'll follow up with a response. We want to extend our gratitude to our Facebook followers, to our panel members, and to our guests who were involved in today's town hall. This concludes today's virtual town hall. Thank you.